tight schedule here, so I thought that I would just give you a brief report and answer a couple of questions. I think the rest of the group, Beto and the rest of the congressional group, will be out shortly. So let me just say, first of all, at the beginning, that I'm very worried that we're headed from one humanitarian crisis to another. And what I'm talking about there is the separation of children from their families, children from their moms and dads, has ended up being a disaster. We all know that. They didn't plan for it. They didn't have a real organization in place to accomplish things and get it done. And signing, I think it's really clear here, you don't just sign an executive order and things happen. You have to have cabinet secretaries come out and present a plan and tell us what they're going to do and how they're going to reunite the 2,300 kids that have been separated from their families. And that's what we need. And so I would say the Attorney General, the Secretary, Attorney General Sessions, Secretary of HHS, Azar, and Nielsen over at Homeland Security, they should all give us a plan of exactly what they're going to do. And it's long overdue, believe me, because of the chaos and disorganization we've seen. But what do I mean, one humanitarian crisis to another? What I'm talking about is now we are going to take families with children and create camps. We don't know yet where. The president's order seems to suggest that the Department of Defense is going to do that, or some other places in the country. We've never done that before, put families in camps. It reminds us of some of the darker chapters in our history. So I'm very, very worried about what I see. I'm not worried about the conditions in the camp. I want to be absolutely clear here. This contractor has done things in terms of emergencies all over the country. This is a very, very expensive proposition. They're spending several $1,000s a day on each kid that is in this facility. A lot of this could be done with ankle bracelets and at $4.50 a day. So, you know, when you look at the economics, people, I would tell you, all of you in the press, ask the economic questions. So happy to take a couple of questions. And Joaquin and Beto are just coming.
Senator Udall, did you meet any of the kids inside? And
yes,
what was that
we
experience
did
like?
see the kids. We talked to the kids. On the whole, I would say the kids were smiling, but you know, there were kids that looked like they had problems. I'm gonna, at this point, Beto, come on in. Come on, all the rest of the folks here. Hey, allow them to make their statements. I may have to peel off.
Okay.
Jump into
Thank you,
all
Senator Udall. I'm just going to make some brief statements. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague from Texas, Congressman Joaquin Castro. He's going to turn it over to the lead of a delegation that's come from the East, Congressman Fitzpatrick, and we'll just take it from there. Very briefly, I want to thank the team that works here, the medical professionals, those who are taking care of kids who are in a very vulnerable position. They're not with their parents. We were able to meet kids who've been separated from their parents, who arrived here at the U.S.-Mexico border from Guatemala. Their parents have already been deported back to Guatemala. They're here in this country without their parents. Having said that, the medical care from what we can ascertain, the food from what we can determine, the facilities, we saw some kids playing soccer. Their general attitude seemed to be positive given the conditions, but nothing makes up for a policy implemented by this administration that takes kids away from their parents here at the U.S.-Mexico border. So a couple of key facts I just want to confirm. There are children here who have been separated from their parents. There are 23 right now. There are girls here as well.
This is the first time.
And I'm going to allow Joaquin to talk about that, but there are girls here who have arrived as early as today. And there is a policy now on the part of our government for the Office of Refugee Resettlement to share information with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's as new as 4 days ago. ORR, entrusted with the safety and placement of those kids who are without family, are sharing who those family members are with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Those are just some high-level facts. Again, I want to thank those who hosted us, the people who work here. Really tough jobs for people who really need that care, and I know that they're doing their best, and we are grateful for that. I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Castro. He'll turn it over to Congressman Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke, and thank you to the members of Congress who came to inspect and look at the center in Tornillo. You can imagine that each of us will have a chance to speak, and we may have a little bit of a different take on this. But for me, this represents a failure and of the broken immigration system in the United States, and a failed policy by the president, who imposed the family separation policy not too long ago and has since reversed course. The reason that this facility in Tornillo exists is because room had to be made in the other facilities for the separated children. We were told that very directly. And while, as I agree with Congressman O'Rourke, many of the staff members here from DCFS, which is a San Antonio nonprofit, has a long history in working in situations like this and contracting with the federal government, it's clear that the staff are doing their best to care for the kids. Still, the fact that they're out here in 105-degree weather in the desert is a symptom, and I think a moral failing on behalf of the United States government. We were told today that 7 girls showed up today. They were the first batch of girls who have arrived at this facility. That these young girls, like everybody else here, are between 13 years old and 17 years old. We did not get a clear answer from the HHS representative about which facilities are holding the young women and girls. That's a disturbing result of this tour, because I was down at 2 facilities in Brownsville last week, and before that visited detention centers and processing centers. And what's clear is that although members of Congress have now visited many facilities, I don't know that any of us has gotten a clear answer about where girls are being kept. And also, I have not been part of a meeting and have not spoken to other members of Congress who are part of a meeting where every government agency who has some part in looking after these children, from Border Patrol to ICE to ORR to other folks at HHS, are all present in the same room to answer questions. And it makes me wonder how seriously the federal government and the Trump administration are taking this issue. I would like to introduce Congressman Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for being here. We came out this morning with a bipartisan delegation to the House. Myself, Stephanie Murphy of Florida, Kathy Rice from New York, Tom Schwazi in New York, Mike Kaufman from Colorado, and Roger Marshall from Kansas. And essentially, when we're formulating policy, we need to base it on facts and data and evidence, and you only learn that by being here on the ground. We don't want to rely on hearsay, we don't want to rely on press reports, and I got to tell you, our trip out here probably raised more questions than it answered. We need a lot more facts, and to Congressman Castro's point, we need to get everybody in one room. There's several different links in this chain, from Border Patrol to CBP, to CIS, to ERO, and to all the components that lie underneath that. If we're going to get serious about immigration policy and getting this right, it's got to be bipartisan, number one, and number two, it's got to be on facts and data on the ground. So, Tom, I want to invite someone to talk.
You know, there's one thing that's clear about today is there's a lot of great people working very hard to try and address these problems in our country. Whether it's the people who are running this facility, a not-for-profit contractor, or whether it's the federal officials that we met at the border today. There's a lot of good people working very hard to try and solve these problems, but the policy is broken, and it's not going to be solved unless we start getting beyond all the rhetoric and start working together to try and get to the bottom of very detailed, complex problems that have been vexing this country for 30 years and are being inflated with the rhetoric. And we need to get down to the facts and solve these problems. I want to thank my colleagues for spending the time that they did here today.
This is not who we are as a country. I think the time for finger pointing should be over. And all of us here, I think I can speak for everyone here, we are looking forward to getting back to Washington, speaking with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and most importantly, this administration, to get this right. This is not who we are as a country. I would say that, you know, as a country, of course, we should be able to secure our borders, but we also have to be able to live into our American values. And what we're seeing here today, the way this policy has been implemented, it makes it clear that there wasn't sufficient forethought, or the enforcement of law and order was order was absent in it, and so that's why we have the situation that we're seeing here. It's heartbreaking to see children in these situations, and I think this is a big problem which requires bipartisan collaboration, and I'm grateful to be a part of a bipartisan group to come down here to get the facts, but more work needs to be done, and we're looking forward to getting back to Washington to do that.
Congressman O'Rourke, you said several of the Guatemalan children, their parents have already been deported. How were you guys able to confirm that?
So I want to thank HHS because they ensured that we could actually talk to the kids. And I want to thank my colleagues because when they said, hey, it's time to move on, my colleagues kept asking questions of the kids to make sure that we got to these answers. But we asked, how long have you been in detention? We heard 1 month, we heard 2 months, we heard up to 3 months. We asked, did you come by yourself? Some said yes. Did you come with your parents? Others told us that they did. Where did you come from? Guatemala. Where are your parents now? They've been deported back to Guatemala. Are you able to talk to them? These children, we understand, we asked the kids directly, are allowed 2 10-minute phone calls every single week. We went to the room where those phone calls were made. We got to see where they sleep. We saw where their medical treatment was provided. But one thing I want to make really clear, total number of family apprehensions at our border is down over what it was last year. Unaccompanied children apprehended is up, but it's up by 3 or 4% total. This crisis, this tent city is only built because this administration decided to impose a crisis by taking kids away from their parents. Don't trust Beto O'Rourke. The guy, the CEO of the company who put those tents up, said the exact same thing to each one of us right now. This crisis is of this administration's doing. This administration can end this crisis, and first thing they've got to do is find out how to reunite those kids. When they share their information with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which has the job of deporting people who are in this country undocumented, that's not going to get it done. And so that's one of the things that we asked about. But to my colleague from across the aisle's point, Mr. Fitzpatrick, we need all of the agencies. Department of Justice, who's criminally prosecuting these parents, Customs and Border Protection, which apprehends them in the first place, Office of Refugee Resettlement, and Health and Human Services all have to be in the same room. There were so many questions we asked where they said, that's not my job description. I can't tell you what we do. So that was some of the frustration that we have.
Lo que vio y qué fue lo que le dijeron estos menores y qué sucede con las niñas, cómo las separan del grupo, qué está pasando con ellas.
Pues están aquí en los Estados Unidos en detención hace 1 mes, 2 meses, 3 meses. Algunos con sus padres han separado de sus padres regresaron por Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Pero los niños están aquí. También pudimos hablar un poco con 7 niñas, las primeras niñas en este lugar que llegaron hoy, mañana. Las condiciones son bien, pero si no pueden estar con sus padres, si no pueden reunir, si no saben cuándo pueden reunir, no importa las condiciones, necesitan estar con sus familias.
¿Cómo se sienten ustedes? Porque los veo afectados por lo que acaban de ver. ¿Podrías explicar cómo se sienten en grupo?
Can you describe the conditions?
Pues tengo vergüenza como ciudadano de los Estados Unidos que estamos haciendo a estos niños que han viajado como 2,000 millas para encontrar asilo aquí, este país de migrantes, de refugios, y estamos tratando como criminales aquí. Yo quiero cambiar esta política, voy a hacer todo lo que puedo con este grupo bipartidista, también con esta administración si podemos, para cambiar, para que podamos ser el país en que yo tengo fe, en que yo sé podemos hacer las cosas más importantes para la gente que necesitan esas cosas en este momento.
And O'Rourke, you were here in 2016 and you visited here, you said it was a humane site here when you visited the tents then. What makes it so different now?
This is the first time that kids have been kept in tents in this location, apart from their parents. This is the first time that we have had a zero tolerance policy where 100% of the parents seeking asylum between our ports of entry are arrested, are prosecuted like common criminals, have their children taken from them, kids who are here who do not know when they're going to be able to see their parents. That in itself is inhumane. As I've said, you could be in a 4-star hotel, that's inhumane. The folks who are working in these tent cities for these kids are doing their best, but we as a country are not. And we as a country have to find a way to get these kids out of these tents and with their families.
Well, and I think also one of the differences is, Kevin, the CEO of PCFS, mentioned that they ordinarily work emergencies. So, for example, Hurricane Harvey, what happened in Sutherland Springs, and at one point referred to this as an emergency. If this is an emergency, it was a manufactured emergency by President Trump and his administration. And again, the reason that these kids are being put in the desert near the border is because the kids that were separated from their families, as the ones I saw in Brownsville last week, had to be put in the other shelters.
Do we know where are the girls from, and do you anticipate more girls to be coming into this facility? Are they being kept in separate quarters from the boys? I mean, can you give us a little more details about the women?
Yeah, the girls seem to be, their disposition seem to be, they quite honestly seem sadder because they just got here. I asked 2 of them how long they've been in detention. One of them said 46 days, the other said 45 days. But they are the first girls to arrive here. And there was no indication from the administrators about whether there are going to be more coming.
Did they tell you where they were coming from?
Guatemala. Yeah, that's right. We asked them, and they said El Salvador, Guatemala, basically the Northern Triangle countries, it sounded like, of Central America.
And their ages, like 16, 17, like the boys?
Yeah, my understanding is that they were between 13 and 17, just like the boys.
Now, what are they eating?
The girls either separate from the boys or to make sure that they're safe, just,
Yeah, there was basically a fence line that was created, so there's a girls' area that's separate from the boys. Somebody asked the question whether there's any interaction between the boys and the girls, and the answer was no, there isn't. The kids, obviously, the heat here affects what they can do. The first group that we came across was a group of about 15 or so that were just sitting in a tent at a table, and we asked them why they were there at that moment. To be quite honest, we're looking for any signs that the administrators are staging things just because we're coming in to visit. These boys said that they had wanted to go outside, but they're not allowed to go outside right now to play soccer and do other things because it's so hot.
Now, the BBC spoke with an attorney who said that people are given, when you're detained or when you're put in jail, you're given receipts for your property, your cell phone, your clothes, but that people are not being given anything for their children. Do you see any indication that might change?
We weren't able to get a lot of clarity on the future for these kids and how they're tracked. One of the things that we learned is that they are sharing information with ICE, but we learned that will not prevent them, at least this is from HHS's perspective, that will not prevent them from placing those kids in a household where there are undocumented immigrants. The question, though, is begged, does someone in a household with undocumented immigrants, now knowing that ICE knows that you're there, want to lift their hand and say, I'll take that child here? You're putting these families in a really difficult position. There has been reporting that kids are staying upwards of twice as long in these detention facilities as they were a year ago, though total apprehensions of families are down. What explains that? Could it be the culture of fear promoted by this administration, where people are afraid to claim their family members? I don't know, but they were not able to answer that question today. Or I mentioned that we were at Annunciation House today. We met a grandmother who is not able to get in touch with her 3-year-old granddaughter, of whom she has custody. A mother who cannot get in touch with her 4-year-old daughter who's in Michigan, has no number, has been given no receipt, no ability to track her whereabouts. I asked ORR and HHS, how do we help these two, this grandmother and this mother that we met today, and they said, I don't know, that's not what we do here, and we don't think that's our policy right now.
And I asked them, I let them know that HHS and the federal government, again, because we can't just parse out and separate the different agencies, because then they just point fingers at each other and claim that somebody else has a responsibility. The federal agencies in charge of this whole process need to provide Congress a complete list of each of the children with all of their information and their parents' information so that we can then go back and audit. They should provide it to the Inspector General also, so that we can go back and audit and make sure that all of those children are being reunited with their parents. Because so far, I have seen no evidence that they have any reliable system to make sure that those 2,300 kids are going to be reunited with their parents.
Now, do you have channels to officially demand that information, or is all you can do is ask and hope for the best?
Congressman O'Rourke and I are going to be working on that when we get back this week, and I know other members of Congress and in the U.S. Senate will as well.
There were buses limited to 10 minutes. Why are they only getting 2 per week? I feel like that's not enough to get in touch with family members that are in the state that might not be able to pick up the time that they're calling.
I agree with you. It seems like a very short amount of time. Also, 10 minutes may be enough time to talk to one relative, but you want to talk to a mother, or you want to talk to your father or a sibling, and 10 minutes twice a week is just not enough.
Here's the thing, you had a delegation, bipartisan delegation from New York, Florida, Pennsylvania, Republicans and Democrats coming here. I gotta tell you, the reason they're here is because of everyone who came out a week ago and shone the light on this facility and demanded to know how those kids were being treated, demanded to know when those kids were going to be reunited with their families, demanded that this policy of family separation stop. And I think it's the people of this country, the people of Texas, people like Joaquin Castro who showed up today that are forcing the changes that we are already seeing. We can't let up, and it really was encouraging for me to hear our Republican colleagues say, hey, this visit generated more questions than it did answers. I didn't hear any apologies for the administration. I heard a desire for accountability, and that same desire is with Joaquin and myself, and I hope every other member of Congress to make sure that we hold this administration accountable, that we reunite these families, that we stop this practice, and that we take a more humane, a safer, and a more fiscally responsible path. There's a program, the Family Case Management Program, for a fraction of the cost. I believe it costs $400,000 a day to keep this tent city open. For $36 per child through the Family Case Management Program, we can keep those families together, and they have a 100% show rate at immigration court. In other words, they follow our laws, our communities stay safe, we can track where they are at a fraction of the cost to the taxpayer, and by acting in the best humane traditions of this country. That's a real opportunity and alternative. So anyone who says, hey, Beto and Joaquin are just criticizing, we're also offering alternatives that have proven to work. So let's also keep that in context as well.
Beto, there are two more.
What's the question?
Our brothers and sisters are allowed to stay together.
It's a great question. I didn't ask. I don't know if you...
We saw boys, again, this was mostly all boys except for 7 girls that were brought here this morning. So I can't give you a definitive answer, but it would seem to me that they separate out.
It's a great question for our team to make sure we ask. I don't know if you all heard that. Our brothers and sisters, our siblings able to stay together. I want to make sure that we ask OR.
Have these kids started moving through the legal system yet, or has the number of kids in Tornillo just continued to grow since last week?
So we asked a question about how long kids are staying in the system and why they seem to be staying longer, though, again, total family unit apprehensions, which is how CBP measures it, are down. Why are kids staying here longer? There was not a good answer. I don't know if it's the wheels of the system moving a little bit slower. I don't know if it's the fear that's been introduced by the administration that is conducting ICE raids throughout communities all over this country, or the fact that HHS and the Office of Refugee Resettlement is sharing sponsor information with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Whatever the reason, these kids are staying here longer than they were before. So I don't know, and they were not able to tell us. Those are some ideas that I have.
What's the hygiene like for the kids? Are they bathing? Are they being cleaned daily?
We saw kids in line to go take a shower. All of them had their towels. We were able to stop, and again, Joaquin may be able to substantiate this. Our minder from HHS wasn't always happy when we stopped to ask those kids how they were doing. They would tell us, hey, you got to move along, there are people got to catch flights. But Joaquin and I and others, Republicans included, took the time to ask those kids. And I really did get the sense that they are being treated well, that the conditions are good. But again, let's put that in the larger context. They're not with their parents. They're strangers in a strange land. At the moment that they needed us the most, we put them in tent cities in 105-degree heat, not with their parents, which is where they belong.
And now, Beto, there were buses coming in and out.
Yeah, they have telephones in there that they're supposed to be able to file any kind of harassment or abuse complaints.
Now, there were buses coming in and out of the port of entry all throughout this whole week, and they were coming back empty. They were taking buses of boys. Where were they going? We hear words that they're going
from here out.
Yes.
I don't know. I know that the people that we met from Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement seem to be doing what they can to place children with sponsors. They told us that they placed 3 this week, 3 kids who were taken from their parents by this country because of a decision made by this administration. 3 of those kids have been reunited. That leaves 23 more of the 26 who were separated and brought here. So I cannot explain the busloads of kids. I know that the population here has been growing, not decreasing, so I think it would be busloads coming in. Somebody asked the census for today. I don't know what it is. I think I'm gonna have to go, but thank you all.
What is the most surprising thing you learned today?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
We'll see you, Beth. Yep. Thank you all.